Welcome to the Impact Players Linking Shields podcast with your host, Warren Mainard and John Beasley. Our mission is simple, inspiring men to be great husbands, fathers, and leaders by equipping them to thrive in the relationships that matter most.
Hey guys, welcome back to another edition of the Impact Players Linking Shields podcast. My name is Warren Mainard. I'm the National Director of Impact Players. So excited today to have a new friend of mine, Anthony Vandagriff, who is the founder of the podcast, Fathering Our Future. And we'll get a chance to talk to him in just a little bit. But if this is your first time with Impact Players, we want to welcome you to the podcast and to the community. Impact Players is all about inspiring men to be great husbands, fathers, and leaders by equipping them to thrive in the relationships that matter most. So if you are a man looking to join a community or start a community of men in your area, then we would love to connect with you and help you to grow to be the husband and father and leader that God's called you to be. And the Impact Players Linking Shields podcast is all about serving that goal. And so what we love to do on this podcast is bring in some of the best leaders in the country who are working in these areas of relationship. How can I be a better husband, a better father, and a better leader? And I think you guys are going to be in for a treat today as we talk to Anthony about fathering, future-focused fathering. And so, Anthony, we're glad to have you. You are a husband, a father of 4 kids, founder of this, Fathering Our Future podcast, and your areas that you really like to focus on when it comes to fatherhood are identity, relationships, and mission. And that certainly aligns very closely with the way that we talk to men about this important role. So thank you so much for being a part of this podcast with us.
Yeah, thank you for having me and for the kind introduction. You talk about bringing in some of the best leaders, and that's kind of humbling to fall under that umbrella. Don't know that I would qualify myself there, but I'm glad to be here.
Well, you know, it's funny because there are so many things in life that you kind of can prove your value or worth by a degree or a title or a job. But when it comes to fathering, there's not a lot of tangible ways that you can say, oh, this guy is an expert in fathering. And,
Right.
Honestly, I had the opportunity to be a part of the National Fatherhood Commission retreat in December. And the truth is, Anthony, that even being a fatherhood expert doesn't mean that you've got it all figured out and that your kids are perfect and doing everything the right way. We're
sure.
all on this journey together, but you are investing into men in this space and certainly helping men grow as fathers. And that, I think, is something that is commendable and that the guys on this podcast are going to really appreciate about you.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that.
Well, one of the things we love to do whenever we bring on a new guest to the podcast is we ask them this simple 4-word question. Tell me your story. And we would love for you just to take some time to share a little bit of your story and how, God has guided you to the place that you are now and the mission that God has given you.
Okay. Well, I'm not going to take you back to the day of my birth, but I'll fast forward a little bit. I was fortunate to be raised in a Christian home, but around the age of 6, there was some sort of altercation that took place at the church we attended, and my family stopped attending. Now, what would turn out to be a blessing for me a few years later is the fact that if we walked out of our backyard and out of the back fence, we stepped into the church's parking lot. So we were very close to the church, which made it very easy for me to get to church when I started in in a ministry called Bible quizzing at the age of 9. So from about the age of 9 until we ended up moving to DFW area when I was 16, I went to church by myself. So from 9 to 16, pretty much, I did it all. I did it all on my own. My parents were supportive. They were never against me going to church. They thought it was great. I used to really like it when I was 14, 15 years old, and my dad would let me drive the truck around the block and on a few streets illegally to get to church when it was raining instead of having to go through the backyard. So that was it. Cool little memories associated with that. But there were plenty of times I walked to church. And again, it's not like the people who were like, I used to walk 3 miles because I was so devoted to God. I just walked in my backyard. Yeah. But still, I went to church by myself for a long time. And in a strange way, I think it worked out well for me because it gave me an opportunity to really ground out and work on my faith in a deeper way than I think a lot of kids my age probably would have. I wasn't made to go to church. I enjoyed going to church. I enjoyed worshiping, and I enjoyed the ministry that I was in called Bible quizzing. I'll fast forward a lot here, but that is actually how I met my wife, Lindsay. We've been married for just over 11 years. And if you want to meet a wife somewhere, a program like Bible quizzing is a really great way to meet a good wife. This was funny to me, and I'll share it anyway. But my wife and I do our best to communicate and to stay in tandem with one another. And we use little decks of cards with questions on them. And one of the questions that we did just the other night was first impressions of when we met one another. What was it that attracted you to your spouse? And, her answer had some depth to it. It was, you were funny, your personality, the way that you were with other people. And I told her, I just thought you were smoking hot. That's really all it was. I mean, there's nothing, that was it. But once I got to know her beneath the surface, I can honestly say that the most genuine, sincere, kind individual. I am far out of my league in every sense of the expression being married to her. So, she and I got married. I moved her down to the promised land here in Texas. And since then we've had 4 kids, 8, 6, 4, and 9 months currently. So I'm kind of back into the thick of it. It was nice being out of the diaper phase with the 3 oldest kids. We're not going to have any more. And part of me is saddened by that. But the other part of me is like, but there's no more diapers. And so, balancing the tensions there, that's really fun. But where I am today, that's a very interesting journey, at least in my own mind. I worked at a ministry for 12 years, and the ministry there had started out to be a podcast, and then it started out to be something that was live streamed video, and it was mainly on the web. And then it turned into, now they're making DVDs, and then it turned into a television ministry where there was multiple TV programs going out on a weekly basis. And my involvement in that ministry, well, it started as a family gig. And so full disclosure, nepotism got me the job. But eventually, over my tenure being there, I moved into video production and ultimately ended up becoming the producer there. So got a lot of experience with video editing and working with audio and being behind the scenes on production and everything that goes into it. All the little tips and tricks that you see and think nothing of, except for when you're behind the scenes and you realize, man, we're really pulling one over on these people. There's a lot, but that's a different conversation for a different day. But I was there for 12 years and it was a family thing. And so as my family was growing, I needed to make more money. But when you work at a nonprofit, you're not really there. Unless it's a hospital, you're really not making the big bucks. So I went to my great uncle, who was the CEO and founder. And I said, I got to make more money. I said, I'm doing a lot here and my family's growing. I just have to make more. I'm going to have to leave. And I don't want to, but that's what I'm going to have to do. Well, he gave me the classic, we'll pray about it response. And I know he meant it. He was the most sincere Christian who's probably walked this planet. And long story short, I left. I started another job. And, God works, I think, sometimes in funny ways. This was a very non-committal prayer. This was a conversation where it was like, God, it would be nice to work in downtown Dallas. because my impression was this is where the important people were.
Yeah.
Work in downtown Dallas, one of these big sky rises, have a great view of the sun rise every single morning. That's exactly what I got. And I hated it. It was not what I wanted. There were complications with the place that I was working at. And after 8 months, I went home after a particular encounter, and I told my wife if I could go in tomorrow and quit, I would. At this point, we were expecting baby number 3. The plan at that point was for her to be a stay-at-home mom because she had not done that with the first 2 kids. And my wife, in her amazing way, said, do it. And so I did. And a few days later, realizing that I was going to have an income if my wife was truly going to work from home or stay home with the kids, I started working with my father, who's a general contractor. He's done that for 30 plus years now. And being his son, a lot of the skills and craftsmanship, I think I just gained through genetics. So I worked with him for about 1.5 years, but during my time working with him, I had a conversation with my pastor because I knew that's not what I wanted to do. I was having the classic struggle, I guess, where the son sees the father and thinks, Dad, you could do this better. let me offer some new wisdom to you. And, I think the saying goes, when someone's changed your butt, it's really hard for you to convince them to change their ways. So my pastor told me, who's also a psychologist, you're not going to convince your dad to do things differently. He said, so just think outside the box. And one of the things that he had shared with me that seems a bit nebulous to a lot of people, that's hearing from God. He said, everyone thinks that hearing from God is this really challenging thing, that God speaks in only weird, mysterious ways. And if you're not so holy and high and righteous enough, you will never hear the voice of God. He said, God's always talking. He said, the trick is you just have to tell him you're listening. So I was like, okay. So I'm praying a very consistent prayer over the next few weeks. And I will never forget this encounter. I was on my way home on a little back road, and I prayed a very specific prayer that I had been repeating for weeks. And it's like all the noise in my mind just immediately went away. And I heard God say exactly this: you like to teach and talk to people. You love being a dad. Start a podcast and call it Father in Our Future. All the noise comes back, and I'm thinking, what just happened? So my Gideon proof test was while I'm driving, and I don't do this on my phone and I don't recommend it, but at this point it was kind of surreal. I went to GoDaddy.com and I typed in fatherinOurFuture.com. The domain was available for $11.99. And I thought, okay, this was real. I buy the domain, I get home, and I tell my wife, I'm starting a podcast. It's going to be called Father in Our Future. And so that's kind of how I got to where I am today. Never expected to be here. I did love being a dad. God was right about that, but I was never super intentional about fatherhood. And there's more that I could say about that. But I was always a theology buff. I wanted to do theology. I actually had a whole nother thing that I had been working on since 2016. I started Father in Our Future, officially released my first episode Father's Day of 2021. So this is early 2021 when this thing happened. So 5 years previously, I'd been working on something else, more theology focused. And God said, do this instead. So here I am, 4 years into this thing, and I'm sticking with it.
Man, that's awesome. And thanks for sharing. And there's so many layers to what you talked about in your story. I mean, there's the layer of having church hurt at a young age, meeting your wife, getting married, having kids. There's the reality of like the frustration of doing ministry, the frustration of not getting paid what you need to take care of your family. There's the kind of the emptiness of a career that is not what you're called to do and is empty. Yep. and just, but it's what the world deems as success. You had the challenge of learning how to relate well to your father as an adult. And then, this like point of trying to discern what God is calling you to do with your life. And lo and behold, God calls you to do something that seems outrageous and um, doesn't seem to make sense to, maybe the common observer. And so I
Yeah,
think all of those things are things that a lot of men can really relate to in your story. And,
for
and
sure.
there's still a lot of story to be written. And so it's cool to see how God has done that over the last, few years, and the way he shaped you and guided you. So, um, you mentioned that you felt like God gave you that, that term, fathering our future. What does that mean to you? Like, what does it mean when you say fathering our future?
But for the longest time, I didn't really understand it. Um, and to some extent, I think it's still a bit unfolding the more that I focus on fatherhood. Um, but what it ended up being for me, at least in this moment, is a lot of people get caught off by our fathering our future instead of like fathering the future, because then you can very much personalize it and say, well, it's the future, and I'm thinking about my kids only. But the thing that I learned about fatherhood early on is that it's a collective work. Um, Maybe not in the same sense of, I've got 7 buddies and all 7 buddies get to father my children. I don't think it means that, but there's so much wisdom and knowledge that we gain from one another.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is more in line with what it means to father our future. Because all of us in this Christian walk, we're disciples, we're a body of believers, and we're supposed to be united. And so if we're doing things the way that God has instructed us to do them, if we as dads are bringing up our children in the training and the instruction of the Lord, if we're doing that, then it's a collective future. It's not just mine. It's not just this nebulous generic future. It's ours. We're attached to it in the same way that you have this generational cascade of patriarchs. Everything is, about Father Abraham. Well, he's the first person. He didn't have Joseph who got everyone to Egypt. That would have been his great great grandson at that point. That was Jacob's kid. But still, there's this attachment to Abraham. It was a part of what Abraham was. So I think that, yeah, we get to play a part in the future in some way, even if we're not there. I had a PhD in family studies on my podcast one time, and I became convinced the fact that fatherhood is not what you do, but it's who you are. Being a dad is who you are. And I was convinced that when you become a dad, you are always and forever a dad. And I asked him that, and he said, that's exactly right. He said, here I am, 60 plus years old. He said, and there are still times where my late father, where just nuggets that he left me come back to my mind, and my dad still in some way is impacting my life. And so to think that, we still will always have some sort of role that we're playing in the future, and our children will literally become the tomorrow that we're going to walk into. I mean, you think about, you have all these senior citizens, but who are the ones who are really making the changes in the world? It's this 35 to 55-year-old gap. And so their parents are literally watching them create the world in which they find themselves in. So I think that's kind of the big idea of fathering our future, that it's a collective work, that we are a part of it, and that our children literally will be a part of molding and shaping the world that we will likely find ourselves in. But big idea, I think that's what it is, that I don't do this thing alone. I do this as a member of a body of believers, even within my own personal home, that it's this community of faith working in tandem with each other to raise up disciples.
Yeah, it's so good. It's so good. So this episode is called Future Focused Fathering. You've got at home 4 kids. I think you said 8, 6, 4, and newborn.
Yeah, 9 months.
9 months. So, there is some in the rearview mirror, but there's definitely a lot still ahead.
Oh, yeah.
How do you father your children with the future in mind? And like you talked about how when you started this podcast, or when you got this calling to do the podcast, you kind of the way you made it sound, at least, was that like, you were kind of just doing your thing as a dad, but it wasn't something that you were majoring in.
For sure.
And so now I wonder, like, how would you kind of define that? Like, how are you thinking more about the future of your kids and the kind of father you want to be in the future? What does that look like for you?
So let me start here early on when we were expecting to become parents and my wife was pregnant. A lot of people, they make the Facebook post, they do the gender reveal, and it's a big thing, and they're all excited and elated. And that was not me. I was not a very emotional person. We talked about when I had you on the podcast, I kind of opened up about this, but my dad, great dad, he didn't have a dad. So I know he was at a bit of a disadvantage when I came onto the scene. But he worked tremendously hard for us. And he did a wonderful job, and I love and appreciate my father, but he was a tough guy. He still is. Very macho, didn't cry, wasn't emotional, just head down, workaholic. I'm going to get this done. And one key thing that kind of impacted my emotional, maybe call it an insecurity or just lack of emotion in general. At my grandmother's funeral, my father's mother, when she passed away, his eyes teared up, but no tears fell. And I thought, okay, if he's not crying here, there's never a time for me to cry. And so I just kind of didn't do it. I would not allow myself to do it. I will say that when I had kids, that all changed. It was kind of remarkable. I cry all the time now, not in a feminine way, a very masculine cry, of course, but I cry all the time because I see the beauty in life, and kids have this unique way of doing that. But anyway, so I just didn't have a huge emotional response when my wife said that she was pregnant. I put on the facade of, I'm happy, this is great, I'm looking forward to this next chapter of life, but it was an expectation for me. I don't know how many men from the dawn of time have done this. So for me, it wasn't all that special. It was, this is what's supposed to happen. And that was the philosophy going into it. When I held my son for the first time, I realized this is different. This is not what I expected. When I held my son, what immediately came to mind was, this is what I was made for. This is fulfillment. This is what I've been longing for. Maybe didn't even realize that I was longing for it, but I realized that this is fulfillment, which, funny story, and I'm sure most people can relate to this, including yourself. When you're getting ready to have your first kid, everyone is very excited for you. People who don't hug you. Their voice is very squeaky. It's almost annoying how excited they are. Like, I'm not even this excited, and it's my kid, and you're over the top. But after all of these encounters with everyone's just immense joy, it's always tagged with this. So do you have a trip planned to get away because your life is about to end as you know it? And it goes from just excitement to doom and gloom. And that was everyone that we told we're having a baby. That was the exchange that we received. That's except funny. For one of my buddies. I had one friend that I've had so much fun with. Even when we get together today, we don't go without laughs. It's just always hysterical. He said, being a dad is the most fun you're ever going to have. And that coming from him meant a lot. And that shaped my mentality going into fatherhood, that this is going to be fun. This is going to be awesome. And I hope that nugget can help somebody else who's going into this thing. Or maybe if you have kids and that's not your mentality, make that your mentality. And it's kind of like when you start to, when you get a car that's red, that's a particular brand, and you actually start to look around, you start to see that everyone else has that same car. When you go into fatherhood thinking this is the most fun I'm ever going to have, you're going to find yourself laughing a whole lot more, smiling a whole lot more. So that was really a game changer for me.
That's good.
And I held my son and I realized this, and this is exactly what I told to all the people who said, how's fatherhood going? Are you getting a lot of sleep? Or are you regretting your decisions? My realization was being a dad is the most fulfilling thing that I have ever been privileged to do, and I love it. And I told everyone that, and it was an immediate buzzkill to their conversation, and they looked for someone else to go and talk to. But it was true. That's what happened for me. And so when God said, "You love being a dad," it was true. I really did. And so when I started this thing called Father in Our Future, and it was trying to figure out, like, God, what do you want me to see? And I focus on fatherhood, and I'm talking to other dads. One of the things that I immediately realized is what I'm doing with my kids. The identity factor comes in. And I think the identity factor that I focus on is it's not what you do, it's who you are. And I think once you make that shift, it goes from checking things off of a list that you need to get done to looking for opportunities to selflessly care and serve your family. And that's totally different. And when you make the mental shift, you perform very differently as a father. And so that was one thing that happened for me. And then I realized what I'm actually trying to do. I'm not just trying to keep my kids alive, like so many of us spend so much time trying to do. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to raise disciples. And so this is where the mission component came in. And the mission that I always tell people is that our mission as dads is to equip and to disciple our kids to be a part of God's mission in a greater capacity than ourselves. And so when I attached a mission to fatherhood, it gave me purpose and it gave me intentionality. And the tag that I put on there is for a reason. We are equipping our kids. We are discipling our kids to be a part of God's mission in a greater capacity than ourselves. The idea behind this is very much biblical, and you can pull it from different places, but I always tie it to looking at John the Baptist, Jesus, and then Jesus' disciples. John the Baptist is on the scene. He's preaching, he's baptizing, and he tells everyone, there's someone coming after me. I'm not even worthy to kneel down and unlatch the man's shoes. Jesus steps onto the scene. At the end of Jesus' ministry and his time here on earth, he tells his disciples, greater things than these, greater works than these will you do. There's this succession of greatness that is laid out for us in scriptures. And I believe with all my heart that part of my mission as a dad is to equip my kids to exceed me as they grow up. The things that I learn now, I instill to them where they are, and they have more time to experience life with this mentality, with this mindset. They're given things that I was not given as a kid. And with that, they get more time, they get more exposure, they get more experience, and they become better in all of these different areas. And so when I'm thinking future focused, I'm thinking I'm making disciples, I'm making people who are going to grow up and who are going to be great witnesses for the gospel, great witnesses of the kingdom of God. They're going to impact lives. They're going to change people. Yes, we want to raise our kids to be independent, and that definitely falls under the umbrella of discipleship. But even as we do that now with our kids, the beautiful thing for me is we get a glimpse of what I think we'll see in the future. I'll tell this quick story and I'll shut up for this question. My son, he's my oldest and he's my only son. He has to be the most emotionally intelligent child to ever walk this planet. My wife had a friend who lost a baby at 20 weeks, which is very uncommon. And we did not have this huge discussion, like, don't bring this up, don't talk about it, because she was coming over about 3 weeks after this happened. My wife just mentioned the fact that her friend lost the baby. And unprovoked, she walks in the front door. My son walks down from his room from upstairs. He walks up to her, calls her by name, and he says, I know you had a baby in your tummy, and I know you don't anymore. And I know that hurts a lot. And I'm sorry that happened to you. And she just starts weeping right there. And she turned to my wife and she said, I wish an adult would have done what he just did for me. Mm-hmm. And so the neat thing is that, yeah, I think there are attributes of our kids that they gain just inherently from God. They're just unique characteristics about them. But much of what and who they are comes from what they observe from mom and dad. And so to see my son at the age of 5 or 6 at that time do something of that magnitude, it's almost like what we experience right now with God in the kingdom. We know the kingdom of God is coming, but it's not quite yet, but there are still miracles that we get to witness on occasion that show us what the kingdom is going to be like. And so when I get to see these little things that my kids do, that they do now at, 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, it gives me such great hope and faith that when they actually get out into the world as independent individuals, they're going to make an incredible impact, not for me, but for God's kingdom. And I think that's the focus. And so I think this future focused approach that we ought to have as dads is we are disciples. We're raising up other disciples. And part of the goal ought to be to equip them to go way further than we could ever venture.
Man, that's so good. Thanks for sharing. And what a neat story about your son, and just his ability to understand how to communicate empathy in a meaningful way.
Yeah.
At such a young age. That's awesome. And
welcome to Impact Players, where we inspire men to be great husbands, fathers, and leaders by equipping them to thrive in the relationships that matter most. Are you asking yourself, how do I become a better man? How can I grow as a husband and father? Can I succeed both at work and at home? We believe the answer is yes. Impact Players provides rock-solid answers and practical tools for men who want to improve in every area of life. Whether you're single, married, a new dad, or a grandfather, our men's groups, leadership training, and resources will help you thrive. Recent studies show men are struggling more than ever. That's why Impact Players is here. We offer cohorts where you can connect with real men like you, courses with actionable steps, and a nationwide community dedicated to winning at home and at work. Join our online community today and access a wealth of materials designed for your growth. Transform your life, impact your family, business, and community. Ready to get started? Visit impactplayers.org now. Be the man you are destined to be with Impact Players.
I would say beginning maybe with the baby boomers and certainly parents that have come after that, I think there's been in America kind of a universal idea that, hey, I want to give my kids a better, upbringing than the one that I had.
Sure.
That I want my kids to have more than what I had when I was growing up. And, sadly, I think that the metrics of what that means have been measured poorly. And as a result, the idea of making sure that our kids had more material goods than maybe, a baby boomer who grew up the children of people coming out of depression and the greatest generation, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. They thought the answer to being a good parent was to making sure that their kids had everything that they needed materially. But what you were sharing was something very different than that. What you were sharing was, I want my kids to have a greater understanding of who God is, who they are in Christ, what God has designed them to become. And I want to, fuel them in their walk with God so that they would achieve greater spiritual, heights than I ever would. Right. And I don't know if most parents today are thinking in that way. Now, if they're a Christian family, they're probably thinking like, yeah, I want my kids to grow up and be Christians. But on a practical, granular level, parents are more focused about, are my kids in the right extracurricular activities? Are they, on pace to become the valedictorian of their school? Are they going to be the best baseball player and get into the travel programs? And do I have a three-door garage type of house that my kids can be raised in, and with a bonus room and all these different things? And so we end up putting an emphasis on being good parents that actually, the studies are showing it are really in many ways hurting our kids more than they're helping them. So, I think from just a baseline level, every parent, every good parent wants their kids to have a great future. But they're not necessarily investing in the right areas in order to achieve the kind of future that their kids really desperately need in this life. And so, I have a saying that I've said over the years that we replicate what we celebrate.
Mm.
And, like you telling that story about your son and, proudly describing the way that he showed love and empathy and concern, when our kids see us celebrating those things, that actually produces, a desire in them to replicate it, to do it again.
Exactly.
If a son only hears from his dad praise and adoration when he scores a goal or scores 20 points, on the basketball court, then that's what he's going to go after to try to, perceive that this is what's most valuable to my dad.
Right.
So here's the question I want to ask you about. In the Bible, we see two different types of celebrations. Again, we replicate what we celebrate, but two celebrations that I think we can apply to our parenting. One is what the Bible may describe as Ebenezer's. In the Old Testament, when God did something amazing and came through for the people of God, they would, pile together a collection of rocks or build an altar, and they would name it something of significance. And, it would say that the people, every time they passed by that altar, that it would remind them of what God had done. And by reminding them of what God had done, it encourages them to believe in what God will do. The other type of celebration is a rite of passage. And, of course, we see that in the Jewish culture, but certainly every culture has different types of rites of passages that celebrate, transition, into childhood, adulthood, from adolescence to maturity, adulthood. So I'm curious, as you think about, your fathering for the future-focused fathering, how do you maybe envision utilizing those Ebenezer's, those things where you go, okay, we're gonna remember this and celebrate this, and then those rites of passage, those things where you go, okay, I see my 8-year-old son is getting ready to enter into a new phase, and so I want to celebrate that and help him to understand what it looks like to take this next step into manhood, or for my daughters to take that next step into womanhood. Maybe have you thought about that, and do you kind of have any, insights on that?
For sure. I think with the Ebenezer's concept, like you pointed out, they would use physical memorials so that as they would pass by them, they would then reflect on the goodness and the greatness of God. And I think every family probably already does this, but maybe not quite with the intentionality that we should. So one of the things that we do, we have a wall in our house, and call it a memorial wall if you want for the sake of this conversation, but we use mixed tiles. So this is a company, and you can get tons of different types of photos from them, but I think they are 8x8 square photos. And what we put on there are these candid, beautiful moments. It's not all the Instagram staged perfect, school yearbook picture. It's none of that. It's just these moments of beauty that we happened to capture of our family. So sometimes it's trips, it's little things. Like there's one that I'm thinking of. I'm holding my second child, my oldest daughter, at my brother-in-law's wedding, and to calm her down, she had to hold a spoon at the little reception, and she's asleep right here. I'm holding her, and she's just holding the spoon. It's just like she's not letting go of that thing, but she is conked out. And so it's these little cute, just blasts from our past, and it's beautiful because oftentimes the kids they'll walk past in the room and they'll stop and they'll stare. And they'll bring up some stuff. And so it gives us an opportunity to talk about how beautiful our life is, not only to talk about it, but also regularly to see, like, we have had a great life. So many people, and this is a very typical thing that people think, but so many people go through life and they're like, man, I just miss the good old days. Like, it's very easy when you have a wall dedicated to your life to realize I'm in it. Like, this is it. Like those were great, but we're still having great things. Every year we add more mixed tiles to the wall. So eventually we'll probably have to find another wall or two. But anyway, that's what we do. And it gives the kids an opportunity to look at everything. And just one simple twist that I would say that we could add as fathers and as parents is, as our kids look at that and we talk about it, just take a few seconds to say, hasn't God been good to us? Just like, look at all the good things God's allowed us to do. And then don't make it about, well, I planned this trip. I mean, who gave you the resources and the ability to do it? All glory should always go back to God. So in some small, very simple way, I think having a dedicated place in your home where there are just candid pictures of you and your kids and just the goofiness of life, because you need to celebrate that.
That's a great example. I mean, photos, certainly have profound, impact. And, when our kids were little, I think even like 1 and 3 years old, I started doing an end of year slideshow where I would just gather together all the best photos from that year, like you said, candid and everything else, and put it together with some music. And we would sit down and we'd watch it at the end of the year and just thank God for it. But what's been cool about it is that, like, every year we get together and we watch the newest video, but then we also go back and watch all the old ones, and we laugh and we smile and talk about, how silly one of us looked in this photo or whatever. But, in this age of, where they say comparison is the thief of joy. And it's easy to look around and feel like, oh, these people have more. I'm not doing as much as this person or whatever. When you see what God does over the course of a year, and you get to see, like, wow, we got to take this trip and we got to enjoy this meal and, we got to see this thing, and it's all put together. It really does cause you to praise God and go, wow, we are so blessed. Like, I can't believe we got to do so many amazing things this year. Like, God is so good to us. So I think that's a great, great example. What about on the rites of passage type of experience?
So on that side of things, I think in a very general sense, I'll approach this two ways. But on a very general sense, we are raising our children to grow up and be independent of us. So I think one of the things that we can do that plays into this is constantly look for opportunities to give our children independence. So one of the things that immediately comes to my mind is we keep a little 2-step ladder in our kitchen so that our 6-year-old and 4-year-old daughter can pull it out and get their own cups and fill up their own water and do things as if they're a grown adult and they can reach everything. We make it, and this is not so that we don't have to do it, because if they're at the table and they say, hey, can you get me a glass of milk? We'll still do it. But it's to give them the opportunity to see I'm capable. I can be independent. I can be autonomous, and to give them exposure with that, because every parent should want their kids to grow up and say, thanks, mom and dad, but I can take it from here. Like, I'll come to you for guidance from time to time, but you've taught me well. I can go out on my own, and we have faith and no worry that they're going out with confidence, but also competence. And so I think doing these little things helps with that. One of the things that was cute that I can't help but share, because I'm glad I did this, When my first daughter was 2, she's the most precocious child of all time. She was walking and talking at 9 months, using full sentences before a year. At 12 months, she reasoned with me, and that was really weird. I laughed and I said, "You're too young to do this." Yeah. Next topic. I went out to the garage, and most dads can probably do this. I went out to the garage and I had a pile of scrap wood, and I said, "You know what? I'm going to build her a little step stool," because she always wanted to wash her own hands at the sink after she used the restroom. She wanted to do it. So I said, I'm going to make it possible for her to do it. So looking for little opportunities where we can give our kids the opportunity to be independent, I think really helps. But on the bigger idea that I think what you talked about with my son being 8, this is something that I've learned a lot about. I've actually spent a ton recently on the podcast dealing with this because most people may be aware of this already, but the average age of exposure to pornography is about 8 right now. And so parents are highly encouraged to, prior to the age of 8, to start having more open conversations about sex and sexuality. And there's a way that we can do that in an age-appropriate fashion. And I think a part of this comes into parental wisdom as well. Every kid develops at a different rate. So, don't just say, well, my kid's 6, I got to go and have the birds and the bees to talk with him right now. You don't always have to do that. But in my particular case, last year I realized I think my son is rather mature for his age. And I think there's some things that we can start to maybe talk about. Now, we are very open with language. We use correct anatomical terms. We don't always sugarcoat everything because it shouldn't be weird. If that's what it is, then why do we make it a weird thing? Probably because of our past. And that's something I talked about a lot in my episodes on this, but we use the actual words because we're not afraid to. And what I have planned for my son, and this has been planned for almost a year now, we're doing a boys cruise. So he's 8, he'll be 9 in November, but my wife and I love to take cruises. And so we're doing a boys cruise, 4 nights, me and my son, just us. And this is going to be more of an intentional conversation where, yes, we'll probably address sex and sexuality, but the way that I am wrapping up this conversation is in the context of God-given identity. So we're going to talk about what it is to be a man, what God has designed men for, what he has designed them to become as in husbands, as in fathers. We're going to talk about the responsibility that's associated with that. I don't know that I think part of the hesitation that so many have today with having a conversation about sex with kids is because they had an awkward experience where they were sat down and it was real quick. If it even happened, it was real quick. And it was like, so you got this thing, she's got this thing, they go together, bada bing, bada boom, you got a baby. That's all you need to know. If it gets weird, come and talk to me. Well, it was very weird right there. So, no dad has ever had a follow-up conversation with their kid. I'm not just going to make it about that, because sex is not just a standalone topic. It is God-given. It's something worth celebrating, but it's within the context of covenant and marriage. So we're going to celebrate manhood, and sex is probably going to come up, and we're going to do it on this boys cruise. And the thing that I think is also helpful is part of the terms of the condition for this is that he would pay his way. So he's 8. And I told him his way was $500. That's not exactly half, but I'm proud to say that he's paid for it. He worked really hard. And he has the money for everything. And so in this, what's going to happen is he's going to see the value of stewardship. He's going to see a little bit of the taste of responsibility that comes with being a man and seeing something bigger and grander down the road and saying, you know what, I'm going to wait for that. And so, not that this is the perfect and best way to go about it, but the more I think about it, the more I think, man, I think I lucked out in some sense of crafting this experience for my son to where I kind of usher him into manhood and what the future holds for him. But I do it so in a way where he gets to see the value of waiting. He gets to see the value of patience and stewardship of resources, and resources including his own body. So for rite of passage, yeah, that's something that I have thought about, and that is going to be the big celebratory entrance for my son. And I've already talked to my wife, and I'm like, we're going to do this with all the kids. I said, we got 3 girls. You get more vacations than I do, but we're definitely going to do this with all the kids.
It's so good. And the fact that you've thought through it a lot, you've tried to attach meaning to every part of the experience, I think is so important.
Yeah.
We did something similar with both of our kids when they were probably 9 or 10 years old. I took my son on a camping trip, and before the camping trip, we met about 5 times to talk about some things leading up to it. And just that intentionality and trying to make it fun, meaningful, memorable, and as non-awkward as it possibly can be is so important. And, thankfully we were able to do something for our kids when they became teenagers, when they got their driver's license, graduated from high school, and now they're kind of in a different season as well. So finding those times and those ways to really commemorate and celebrate a transition from one phase of childhood or adulthood into the next is so important. Another kind of component to this is, change themes a little bit. Before a sailor steps on the boat, he must chart his course. It's really important as a parent to navigate your course and where you want to go, where you want your family to look like 5 years from now, 10 years from now. But there are also those challenges of navigating the elemental, challenges. Like none of us anticipate a storm or a detour or something like that to happen. So as a dad, how do you kind of balance those 2 principles between like taking time to develop a plan for your parenting and for your kids and your family, and then being willing and able to like adjust your plan as life throws you some unexpected, curveballs along the way?
Yeah. So I would say the first thing with even, charting this course, if you will, is we have got to take on the mentality of a learner. Mm-hmm. That's one of the things that I realized quickly, in this concept of fathering our future. My kids are growing up in a world much different than the world that I grew up in, and it's going to continue to change. So I might have some valid history and experience that I can extract principles from, but I can't say, look, I've been there, I've done that. Here's my T-shirt. That T-shirt doesn't fit anymore. Yeah. It's different. So if I'm not intentional about learning and researching, then I'm probably going to miss the mark. I mean, take the example of the rite of passage boys cruise that I brought up. My dad did not have a father growing up. I never got any talk. I didn't get any reference. I got nothing about this. I learned what I learned through peers and pornography. Yeah. And I don't want the same for my kid. So in order to equip myself to do this, I had conversations with people who are, I would consider experts, at least good contributors to this. I talked to Focus on the Family. I talked to Dr. John Deloney. I talked to a local pastor who suffered and struggled with an addiction to pornography and overcame it and wrote a big memoir about it. I talked to lots of people, marriage counselors on, you're here, you're dealing with the complications. Now, what do we do with our kids in order to prevent what happens later down the road? Mm-hmm. So taking in more content and more information, whether it's you're just reading books, you're listening to podcasts, you're just doing research on different things. I think that's what we have to do. That's the mentality that we have to adopt if we're actually going to prepare things in a way that helps our kids. If we're not going to do that, whatever course that we think we chart is probably going to go awry really quickly. So the lifelong learner mentality, I think, is first. But yes, there are plenty of hiccups along the way. 2 things that I will add to this. The first thing is become a friend with patience. I think one of the worst things that we can do is react instead of respond. And one day my son came home from school, and this was the beginning of his first grade year. He came home from school and he said, "Dad, some kids at school were talking about the F word." And I said, okay. So I could have freaked out right there. I could have done what a lot of the old school church mamas would have done and been like, bar, soap, bathroom right now. But I didn't. And I went on with the conversation. I said, did they say what it was, or did they just call it F word? He's like, no, they said it. I said, well, tell me in my ear, what was it? And he said it. And in this moment, there's a brief pause for me. Okay, he said the word, and I'm okay with the fact that he has said the word in this context. This is okay. We don't talk like that in our home, but this is okay. I said, yeah, buddy, that's the one. I said, how about we go get dinner and just talk a little bit tonight? And he was excited. Like, I didn't make it about the F word. I just said, let's just go have dinner. I told my wife, it's like, Frankie just dropped the F bomb. He knows what it is. We're going to go to Taco Bell. We're going to have dinner. And she was like, good. So we go and we just talk about it. And the conversation, and I think this is good. This is just maybe a tangent here, but the conversation was not, we don't say this. We just don't do that. I think it's wrong for us to tell our kids what not to do and never tell them what to do. I think the focus should often be on, here's what you actually do. Here's how you actually go about life. And so I told him why. I said, we just don't talk this way. I said, it serves more people if we can speak with words that are appropriate for everyone, that don't offend anyone. I said, it's going to give us a greater reputation with more people. I said, it's in line with what the Bible tells us to do. And I said, honestly, buddy, I think you're smart enough to use other words where you don't have to dilute your vocabulary. And so we had this good conversation, and at no point did I ever condemn him for saying the word. But with that, I think taking that breath, just inhale, exhale, and then taking just that brief moment to stop the reaction and give yourself time to respond. I think that's a smart way forward. And it reminds me very much of Psalm 46:10, when everything is chaotic, just be still and know that God's in control. So, being still, taking that pause, and then responding over reacting, I think is a smart thing. And then there's going to be plenty of things that we just get wrong that are not going to be because of our kids. It's just going to be our mistakes. And this is where I think communication is so key, just having open communication with your kids. We don't often sugarcoat things. If we feel a particular way, I've told my kids, you know what, this happened and it made me upset, it made me angry, and I overreacted. And my choice word with the kids is knuckleheads. I said, and I was kind of a knucklehead just now. I said, I'm sorry. I apologize. I made a choice. You didn't make me do it. I was a knucklehead and chose the wrong thing. But having communication like that makes it easy for the kids to come to you and be like, I think I did the wrong thing. And when you're not always trying to condemn them, but you're trying to love them and serve them and actually teach them, because it's not about, what parents think about me from my child, but it's more so about, what does God think? Am I actually discipling my kid? That approach of just open communication, it does way more than that. But one of the side benefits in my mind is when there is a change, you're approachable and your kids can get understanding about the change, and then they can get back on board with what you're trying to do. So lifelong learner, don't react, respond, and having open communication in the home, I think significantly helps with charting the course and then adjusting to the storms that come our way.
Wow. Wow, that's so good. I love those stories and examples. And I love that idea of responding, not reacting. I think the way I talk to men about it is that we have two choices. We can be impulse driven or spirit led.
Yeah.
And
it's good.
The impulse that's the flesh.
Right.
That's just what we do whenever we don't take time to really let the Spirit, lead us and transform us.
Right.
And so, you can't blame a mom or a dad when their kid drops the F-bomb that they freak out and they go, don't you ever say that word again. And there's anger and all, like, it's just a natural reaction.
For sure.
But as parents, if we can really strive to be spirit led, then we can do what you talked about. We take a breath. Lord, what do you want me to say in this moment? Because I don't have the answers right now. And this is totally out of my depth. I didn't get prepared for that. Okay, the Spirit is telling me what to do.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go get Taco Bell.
Yeah.
You know, and like those things are so critical for us as dads to really do this thing well. And it applies to our marriage. It applies to our relationships at work and in church, online, I mean, how many times do people just type the first thing that comes to their head?
Keyboard warriors.
Yeah. And if we can just be the type of people that respond with a Spirit-led response is such a beautiful thing. Well, Anthony, this has been so good. We can take a lot more time to talk about this because there's so much meat left on the bone. But as we kind of bring this to an end, how can guys that are listening follow you, learn more about your podcast and what you're doing to invest in men, helping them grow to be better fathers and leaders in their home?
As long as they remember Fathering Our Future, they'll be set. If you search for Fathering Our Future on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram, you will find me there. I don't post a lot on LinkedIn. That's just my individual page, Anthony Vandagriff. Probably not worth following, but you're welcome to if you want. But if you go to fatheringourfuture.com, that's where you can probably get the biggest bang for your buck. There's blogs there. The podcasts are also hosted there as well, even though you can get it on any podcast platform, Apple, Spotify, wherever. You get everything if you go to the website, and there's some freebies that are attached to the homepage too that you could take advantage of. So fatheringourfuture.com is probably the place to go.
All right. Well, Anthony, thank you so much for being a part of this. Guys, thank you for being a part of the Impact Players Linking Shields podcast. If you're looking for a place to connect and form deeper relationships with other men, please be sure to check out Anthony and the Fathering Our Future. And of course, visit us at impactplayers.org. We'd love to help you get plugged in so that you can find your band of brothers who are walking alongside of you to become the husbands, fathers, and leaders that you want to be and that God's called you to. So, Anthony, thank you again for joining us. We hope to have you back in the future, but thanks for being our special guest today.
For sure. It was my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for the Impact Players Linking Shields podcast. We hope you're inspired to become a better husband, father, and leader. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, leave a 5-star review, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode. Stay connected and continue your journey with us. Visit impactplayers.org for more resources and updates. Thanks for being a part of the Impact Players community. Keep thriving in the relationships that matter most.